So we are so excited to be here with Drew Branyon from Home Team of the Triad, which is one of our favorite home inspection teams. This is Carrie Carrico with Carrie Carrico Real Estate, and today we're going to talk all about a pre-listing home inspection and what it's all about, why you should get one, why it's worth it, just all the little details about all of that. But let's get going. And Drew, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. We got New Year and stomach bug flowing through the family, and um, just trying to hang on the best we can with little kids. But all in all, nothing to complain about.
Good. Well, good there. Deal. Yeah, I just got back from Florida, so that was nice. So
Yeah,
it's
it's what 30, 31 degrees as we're doing this right now outside. So Florida sounds pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah, the 63, which was the low, would be really nice right now. So
Yes.
yeah, it's definitely great weather. Well, let's just kind of like hop into what a pre-listing home inspection is. Can you just kind of explain that so that like sellers out there that have never heard of this, because when I bring this up, they're like, "What? I don't understand what that is."
Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, and I think this is where the conversation probably should go is like, it's a strategy, right?
Yeah,
It's a sales strategy. How do you maximize what you have? How do you make a transaction go smooth?
yeah,
And a pre-listing inspection is a great way to do it. In terms of like what it is,
yeah.
it's basically just getting a home inspection
Mhm.
before you put it on the market, as opposed to waiting on the buyer to do it. Now, the buyer is still probably going to get their inspection. They absolutely should have somebody that works directly for them, that is in their corner and defends them and all that kind of stuff, and just confirms that whoever did the pre-listing inspection didn't miss anything big. Which two inspectors are going to have different eyes on the property. Stuff's going to
Yeah.
pop up, right? But in previous markets, when things are flying off the shelves, like it's hard to really utilize a pre-listing inspection.
Mhm.
But I think like we're in a market now where doing that ahead of time, even though like it doesn't conceptually make sense to a lot of people, because they're like, well, why would I pay that? Isn't that something the buyer's supposed to pay for? Why am I going to spend $500 to just find out what's here?
Yeah.
There's a lot of strategy behind that.
Yeah.
If it's coached right and if you do it right, will
Yeah.
actually potentially save you thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, you were talking about when a buyer gets a home inspection. Is there any like difference between what a buyer does after you're under contract with that home inspection compared to your home inspection?
No, not necessarily. I think the biggest thing is you start getting, like pest inspections are a good example of this. We're
Yeah.
certified to do termite inspections. But the second that it's listed in MLS, we have to put it on a wood destroying insect report,
Hmm.
right? So you have the ability to get some different things at a cheaper price by doing it before you put it on the market, because we no longer have to put it on that form
Yeah.
if we're doing the termite inspection, right? So like I don't mind our guys doing it and basically saying like, hey, like yeah, you have some termite activity here and you need to get that treated, and we
Yeah.
can write it up however it needs to be written up. But outside of that, I mean, the state of North Carolina tells us what to do in the standards on every single inspection, and that doesn't necessarily change on a pre-listing. I think the biggest difference, like if you're talking about like actual
Yeah. What's the
nuts
difference?
and bolts and stuff like
Yeah.
that, I think the biggest thing that changes is the CYA language and the harshness of a report. So if I'm doing an inspection for you before you're putting it on the market,
Mhm.
we're going to have a more open conversation of with the agent, as well, of like we're not going to like overly CYA on like a structural engineer. We're not
Yeah.
going to overly CYA on a licensed individual,
Okay.
because there are some things that, and I think this is part of the strategy, right? Like you get to pick who fixes things,
Mhm.
and like yeah, like GFCI doesn't work. Do you need a licensed electrician to do it? Not really.
Yeah.
Like to
Yeah.
change out an outlet, like a good handyman that knows what they're doing is fine,
Yeah,
right?
for
Now
sure.
you're touching the electric panel or you're trying to rewire something, like absolutely licensed electrician.
Yeah.
But that's where you start saving money in this, is like you can start seeing like, hey, these are the common things that pop up.
Mhm.
We can knock those out and we can pick who does this
Yeah.
so that we can have that ahead of time. So now, like, instead of, we just paid a guy $250 to replace his GFCI outlet, but he was a handyman and, did a good job in and out, fixed some other stuff while I was here. Where if you had waited until that buyer does their inspection, um, you put it in the hands of an agent or a buyer that is under stress, it's under emotion,
Yeah.
and now they're asking you for a licensed electrician, and they're starting to look at things based on code, and it just kind of unwinds things. And
Yeah.
you didn't really need that level of protection to begin with. Now it's just fixed, and it's just not going to pop up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure, for sure. So that's kind of the difference between the two. What do you feel like the main benefit for the sellers? I think you've already talked about it, but just again to recap that for like, having a pre-listing inspection, what's the biggest benefit?
Well, I think it's knowledge is power.
Mhm.
I there's definitely some old school people that are probably watching this that are like, but then I have to disclose it, and I don't want
Yeah,
to disclose anything, and how does that put me at liability? And like, totally get that. But if you look at it from, if you take the report, and you either have to have some money, or you've got to be willing to negotiate price point, right? But if you get stuff done ahead of time because you know what's there and you know what's going to affect the deal,
yeah.
and you can plan for it,
Mhm.
you're going to get under contract faster.
Yep.
You're going to it's going to set the buyer at ease.
Mhm.
And ultimately, like, what we've seen is, there's less chance of people walking away,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like a good example of this is, like, so here's a good example. There's a listing agent that we work a lot with, and she had a house that completely fell through. So the house didn't fall down. The deal fell apart.
Yeah,
We haven't seen many houses fall down.
yeah,
Maybe one, but the every now and then one catches fire, and I'm like, did we
yeah,
cause that? Did we miss something?
yeah.
Thankfully it's all in ashes, but no, but like, so they did a sewer scope as
Uh-huh.
part of the buyer package, right, where they're
Yeah,
checking the sewer line, and
yeah.
the inspector, unfortunately, um, I don't know that we missed something, or he was undertrained, or whatever it was, but made it, put something in there that was an issue that actually wasn't an issue,
Yeah.
right? So sewer lines are gigantic expenses.
Yes, they
If
are.
you have to fix it, you're talking, anywhere from 7,000 to 20,000, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a
Oh,
big fix.
yeah.
So the deal fell apart partly because the house wasn't, in great shape, but also they were like, yeah, but this $10,000 fix is a big deal, and it's scary for our buyer, and they can't take that on, and they weren't even willing to negotiate at that point, so the deal fell apart.
Yeah.
But if they had gotten that done ahead of time, and you see that, and you see that it's an issue, and what ended up happening with this is they ended up hiring us to do a pre-listing inspection after the fact,
Hmm.
so that they could, like, kind of go back and say, like, hey, here are the things that
Yeah.
are popping up. But with the sewer scope, like, they brought in an expert to look at it and be like, no, this is actually what is happening here. It's fine. Right. So, like, things like that, where, an inspector is going to be like your general physician and say, like, hey, your knee's hurt, and go see an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and take that step now, so you can open up what that is to say, like, hey, this thing in the report here is scary, but we got it evaluated, and it's totally fine. And if you
Yeah.
want to get it evaluated by your person, that's totally fine too. But now we don't have that. We have knowledge that it's not that big of a deal, or if it is that big of a deal, you're pricing according for it, or you're putting seller concessions toward getting it fixed, or you're just going ahead and getting it fixed,
Yeah.
and then it just isn't a concern for the buyer.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense because the houses I've had, I don't have a lot fall through, but like once in a while I'll have one. And yeah, the last one I had, we had the inspection report. I just like gave it to all of them and it actually helped. They didn't actually ask for anything, because they were like, "Oh, it's in great shape." So,
Yeah, I mean, it gives, the thing that I'll always look at too is, like, we've had some people that do, and they're like, well, what if there's nothing? Like, we actually, this is funny, we had a client that we did a pre-listing inspection for, and um, the seller called us back and complained and threatened a lawsuit, because that's what people do.
yeah.
Because we found too many things, and it was going to, you know not
Yeah.
make a deal go through. I'm like, well, this is your opportunity to fix it because this is going to show up whether you use us or you use somebody else. Like these are the
Yeah.
things that are going to pop up, right?
Yeah.
And like if there's nothing majorly wrong, but you've got 25 issues on the summary,
Yeah.
and now you can shrink that. You can pay a handyman $1,000 to shrink that down to 10.
Yeah.
Like this is a buyer's agent. Like, what does that do to the home inspector, the buyer's agent, and the buyer when they go through that process? And the home inspector is looking at this 10 summary list thing when they do the report, and they turn to their buyer and say they've done a great job of this house because it's a 1985 house and there's never just 10 summary items here, right?
Exactly.
So it
Yeah.
sets them at ease, sets them in positivity. The buyer's agent's going to agree with it.
Yeah.
And then you're starting to talk about like, okay, now we're not having to ask for this giant list of things. Like we've got 10 things, we're able to pick two things, or we're able to go, surely nothing here
Yeah.
and move on, right? So we deal a lot with contracts that have fallen through, and I would say pretty consistently. And this is where like being careful on who you hire
Mhm.
as an agent. A
Yeah.
lot of this stuff falls apart because people don't know how to navigate this
Yep.
section, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the pre-certified used car.
Yeah.
That's really all it is.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And definitely like in some senses, I think the pre-listing and inspection could also help you be able to, as a listing agent, navigate is this FHA or can you have a VA loan? Is
For
it does
sure.
it qualify for these? So I can see where having that home inspection could, if you have a house that could be like just age wise, that I feel like that could help a little bit because you're addressing issues that could arise and maybe it doesn't qualify for that. So I definitely see that helping a lot. With the pre-listing home inspection, what is actually involved in that and how long does it typically take? Is it just like a normal home inspection? Because there's a lot of people that didn't even maybe know what a home inspection actually entails or how
Yeah.
long.
So it's a standard home inspection. It's done the same way.
Uh-huh.
It takes we run a team, so it takes us about an hour and a half, 2 hours. If get an individual inspector, it's going to be probably 3 to 4.
Yeah.
You're going to get a report with everything from condition of the roof, the attic, the interiors, kitchen appliances,
Yeah.
electrics, HVAC, foundation. Like it's a very good inclusive scope on things that are
Yeah.
visual. So the thing that like I would say that is a con to a pre-listing inspection is what happens if we see signs of something, you start opening things up and it turns into like a much larger expense that maybe wouldn't have been discovered during due diligence, right?
Yeah.
And so it has that potential, but I'd say that that's pretty small. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like I don't know, I look at it how I would be selling a house. Like I want the person moving in to have a good experience with me and not moving in being like, hey, they hid something, they were trying to cover something up, or I moved in with a $20,000 issue that I didn't know about. But yeah, it's all pretty common. I think the seller has to be prepared for prepared for the inspection,
Yeah.
right? Like if you have maintenance records, making sure that those are available, if you making sure that things are unblocked and there, and making sure that like this is probably one of the biggest things for a seller to get prepped on is like don't get emotional,
Yes. Yeah,
right? It's
definitely.
hard, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll make fun of my dad. Hopefully he's still watching at this point, but
Yeah.
like my dad did a lot of work at the house, right? And me and my brother are both home inspectors, and we critique him all the time. And he tells us that we're wrong, which is fun.
Yeah.
And but like that's a common thing to have happen with the seller when you're going through and you're like, hey, like this isn't, like
Yeah.
the handy dad repairs. When you tell a buyer about it, they're like, okay, yeah, like of course we're going to ask for that. But you tell the seller who is the handy dad
Yeah.
that these are handy dad repairs and you need to get them looked at, then they start getting defensive about it,
Yeah.
right? When in
Definitely.
reality, it's like, we're not trying to critique your work.
Yeah.
We're not trying to say that, like, but we are saying, like, there are potential issues with this, and this is going to pop up down the road. Take care of it now so it
Yeah.
doesn't come up, right? Because,
Yeah.
dad repairs are one of the three things that we always say, like, and there's some in my house too. Like
Yeah.
I'm not above a dad repair. But you know, it's one of the three things that when we see them consistently, we're like, this house, like, there's some red flags here you need to
Yep.
take a look
Yep.
at.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a house next week that I feel like there's some data repairs in that. You guys are doing a home inspection for me. I feel as if we're going to run into those a few because I
Yeah.
noticed it when I was going through the house. I was like, oh, okay. Well,
Yep.
it's fun. But it's, just make the buyers aware and we'll just move on with it and we'll see how that'll go. So in these inspections, is there any common flagged items that most all sellers see or deal with, or are they all just totally different?
There, I'd say like there's consistent things in every style of house.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you have a slab home with vinyl siding, like I can pretty much tell you there's going to be slab cracking on certain
Yeah.
areas of the house. There's going to be the potential for cracked trusses in the attic. There's going to
Yeah.
be, potential water issues if the siding is too low to the ground. So it's not necessarily every house, but like if you choose not to get a pre-listing inspection,
Yeah.
and you want to prep your listing ahead of time, like the biggest things are just like, what are the deferred maintenance things? Like spending $200 to get your HVAC system maintained
Yeah.
is so well worth it. Like if it's in good, like if I were to sell my house, like I know our system's in good shape.
Yeah.
I would still get an HVAC person out here to basically put their stamp of approval on it and say like, hey, look, this is in good shape. Doesn't really cost me anything because we have a maintenance agreement with them, right? And now we show we take care of the house, right? Making sure that like areas around your sink and your bathtub are caulked and that your doorknobs are tight and your light switches all work and your light bulbs are replaced and that you don't have any weird holes in your yard right up against the foundation.
Yeah.
Making sure all your water spigots are working, that no small leaks exist. Like those are all really small things that a handy dad can do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, if you're not comfortable doing it, don't do it. But testing all your GFCI outlets to make sure that they test and reset.
Yeah.
Like those are all things that are very simple things to do that if you can, like, they pop up on every single inspection report. And if that knocks, 10 items off the list,
Yeah.
it takes one afternoon and a little bit of attention and, you know,
Yeah.
you knock a lot down, right? The concept is still there, even though you don't get a pre-listing inspection.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, have you seen where the pre-listing inspections have impacted the home's market value? Have you seen that from ones that you've done or the
Yeah,
sales?
so I think it kind of goes in two ways, right? Like I
Yeah.
think the conversation, the real conversation that you have to have with the seller, or if you're a seller watching, potential seller watching this, like you have
Yeah.
to understand is if a big issue is discovered, you are going to have to talk about either
Yep.
putting cash into it or adjusting the sales price because of it,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the idea is like not to negotiate twice, right?
Yes.
So, hey, we have a $10,000 issue here. We're going to adjust the sales price by 10,000 to accommodate this repair that we know needs to be done.
Mhm.
Or hey, we are going to put so many $1,000 into a seller closing thing. And if you
Yeah.
choose to do it, you choose to do it, but it's here.
Yeah.
We had an office that this was probably 2017, 2018 that actually tested this and
Mhm.
they were getting a 3% higher list to close ratio
That was my
with
question.
with a pre-inspection than without a pre-inspection. So, on my math's not good. We're gonna do $100,000 house just for simple math.
Yep.
Like you're talking about the difference, to spend $500 could net you an extra 2,500,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see that. And that was kind of like my question, like, is it appealing for buyers, potential buyers to see the
100%.
home inspection? I think it can be because they already know like coming in and like I've had a couple buyers that are like, "Hey, can we do a home inspection beforehand?" I'm like, not really. I mean, can't really. I mean, the seller's not really going to let you do that. But I can see where it could be super like good, potentially great for the a buyer to know, hey, there's nothing major.
Well, and if you use it as a marketing material during, the showing period, right? Or during an open house where you can have the report printed out,
Yeah.
put it in a binder, put it alongside any documentation on repairs that you've done.
Mhm.
right? So like, hey, like, yeah, this one had a cracked truss and we got a structural engineer and we got it repaired and here's the letter to do it. Um, Having that out there, like to me, is probably going to drive the price up,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Or at
definitely.
least create some urgency on like, hey, they're taking really good care of this house. We know what's here because the risk that the buyer is going to take, they're willing to take more risk with
Yep.
more information instead of going, I don't know if I want to put 5,000 to down,
Yeah.
down in due diligence, where all of a sudden, like now you have the ability to say, like, look, we did the inspection, we did the fixes,
Yeah.
and this is a competitive price point. We want more due diligence,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
definitely. I can definitely see that. And it just makes the buyer feel so much more secure and the lender. Honestly, both of them.
Yep.
Have you had a situation just from your experience where you've seen how much it's benefited the seller by doing a pre-listing? Have you have any of them that you've dealt with? Because I
I
think we
mean,
kind of talked about one, but
I think we've seen a lot of sellers' faces light up
yeah.
when we've done the buyer's inspection.
Yeah.
And, like we don't want the sellers to be present
Yeah.
95% of the time. There are a handful of people out there that can
Yeah.
hear that stuff, they can digest it, and they can put action to it immediately, right? Like we did a house in Greensboro several years ago that the house is owned by two pharmacists.
Mhm.
They had plenty of money. They didn't do any of the work themselves. That you can
Yeah.
tell they hired out pretty much everything, and there was a really bad moisture issue in the attic that was causing, like, the sheathing was basically rotted out. This is $1 million house 5 years ago, right? So probably
Wow.
like $9 million now.
Yeah.
And so it's mold all in the attic, it's
Oh.
leaking into the attic, but it was tucked away in a corner
Mhm.
that they would never have seen.
Yeah.
And her, like, she was shocked at this, right? Where
Yeah.
she's like, well, how would I have seen that? I was like, you wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Like, you have to bring us in before you do this in order to see this issue. She's like, I would have gotten it fixed.
Yeah.
And we had another one where we did with the buyer where the shower drain was completely undone,
Oh, wow.
and it was just dumping water into the crawl space,
Yeah.
and had been for a while. And
Wow.
so that creates mold issues, it creates moisture
Yeah.
issues, but in this case, it actually created structural issues.
Uh-huh.
So it had created enough damp dirt that the piers started to shift and actually created a crack right down the middle of the house.
Oh, wow.
And again, the guy took care of the house. Like, it was a nice house,
Yeah.
600, $700,000 house. And he didn't understand. Like, he was like, I never knew that
Yeah.
this was going on. Right. And, you can take that and say, like, hey, I get, we want to put this on the market in February. We want this, sold by the end of March. Also, getting that pre-listing inspection, like when you talk about like saving you money and saving you time, you
Yeah.
put that on the market in February trying to get it sold by March, and you have a $30,000 structural issue. Maybe they're trying to negotiate more, things fall apart, and you lose more money than if you waited for a few minutes to get that
Yeah.
done, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
I've got children knocking at my door. Hold on one
Yeah.
second. You can edit this part out, right? Yes.
I have no idea. In my head,
A 6-year-old emergency is much different than a 60-year-old emergency.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. So, okay. So is there any like situations where it may not be beneficial to the seller?
I think if you're kind of one of those, like, I mean, I think the market that we were just in is kind of the ideal with that. If you know you're in a price point where it's going to move fast,
Yeah.
and you've got it priced right, and it's going to be competitive, potential
Yeah.
multiple offers, stuff like that, like it may
Yeah.
not benefit you.
At all. Yeah.
It could, the thing is, like, it may not benefit you on a financial end,
Yeah.
right? But it absolutely could benefit you on a faster transaction.
Totally. I agree with you. Yeah, because you already have it out there. So if somebody, especially with the market that we just came from, if you had a home inspection, the buyers would be like, oh, okay, it's fine. We're good. Because, we've been doing repairs for, gosh, the last year and a half, we've been doing a lot more repairs.
Yep.
But before, there was no repairs with so many houses. And so I could
Yep.
see where this could definitely benefit you in certain markets. Um,
Well, and when you talk about like faster transaction too, right? Like, and this is where like there's a lot of realtors that don't understand this concept,
yeah.
right? Of faster transaction actually means that you now have more capacity to sell more homes,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So like as a real estate agent, if I'm a listing agent or I'm a buyer's agent, like I would be attracted to that because I want the shorter transaction time. Because if you can shorten every transaction by
Yep.
6 or 7 days and you do 10 transactions a year, like you just saved yourself 10 weeks of time,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But you can have extra capacity to go sell more stuff. So
Yep.
like from a strategy on a agent side, it is strategy on smoother transactions, less time involved, and it's worth
Yeah.
paying, in my opinion, to do it. But I think like I lost track of the question.
Oh, the question is
Got on my
just like,
soapbox.
where is it like not, where would it maybe not be necessary, which we kind of talked about already. I just was saying like with the house, is there any kind of houses that you'd be like, I think you're good? Or are you, do you feel like every house should have one?
I think it's if you're not willing to do anything with it and you're
Yeah.
not willing to use it as a strategy, then there's no point, right? Like I think
Yeah.
some people do that. Like some people, their agent will be like, get a pre-listing. And
Yeah.
they're like, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. What
Yeah.
do we do now? And they're like, I don't know. My home inspector just told me to get a pre-listing
Yeah.
inspection. And now but I have no idea how to use this and how to utilize it. Right. So I mean,
Yeah.
I think like that's important too, that
You
if you're
understand
working
it.
with the seller and or you're listening to this, you're about to sell and you're like I know what's going on in my house and I don't need to get this done and I'm not going to do any fixes and if it
Yeah.
costs me a little bit extra down the road, like that's fine.
Yeah.
Don't pay us to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Like
I get it. I get it completely. So what are the actual charges, like the cost to do a pre-listing inspection? So I think that's kind of what I'm, would be curious to let everyone know what the costs are. What do they run?
yeah. So our average home inspection I think is 485.
Yeah.
So I mean you're gonna be between 450 and 550 typically because typically the smaller homes in a lower price point aren't going to do this, right? And quite honestly, like the fixes in smaller, lower priced homes typically aren't as bad until you start getting like really old and just not taken care of for a long time.
Yeah.
But if you're about to put a $750,000 house on the market, um, like everybody's cash situation is different, and
Mhm.
we actually, if it closes in 60 days, like you can actually pay at closing with us.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
you could get the pre-listing inspection and still pay for it at closing as long as you know that if it doesn't close in 60 days, like you have to pay it.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
like it's an incentive on that end too. But I think like cost wise, that's really what you're looking at. Like if you want to get really in depth, how much do you want to open up? Do you want to do a sewer scope? Do you want to do a radon test if you're, basement home in advance, like you might want to think about it.
Yeah.
But some of that stuff is, the add-on stuff I would typically say like put that on the buyer.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely, for sure. So these pre-listing inspections, because I know we just came from a really hot market in the last year and a half or whatever, we haven't really been in that type of market. Are the pre-listing inspections becoming more common today, or are they, or are you seeing that, and why or why not do you feel like they are, if they are?
Yeah, I think they are becoming common where
Mhm.
agents that have been in the business for a long time
Yeah,
understand what kind of market we're in and they can get an idea. Like you just talked about a house we're doing next week that probably has a lot of dad repairs. Like if you were listing that house,
yeah,
you might take a step back and say, like, we probably need to do some work on this first.
Yeah.
right? And your job is to provide the options, right? Hey,
Yeah.
like I can either bring a contractor out here to do some stuff and get a
Yeah.
pre-listing inspection, kind of see what's here,
Yeah.
or you can just like these are things that I'm seeing that I know are going to pop up that you might want to just get taken care of, right?
Yeah.
So I think experienced agents are absolutely
Hmm.
using them more,
Yeah.
especially if they know going into it that there's going to be work involved. Like they're not
Yeah.
trying to like just quick flip these.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the thing like you also have time now too, right? But
Yeah.
we have average day on market's 45 days or something like that.
It is. Yeah.
So you have a little bit more time than the 15 days we had 2 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, or less. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, having more time is super helpful because you can figure out things and fix things.
Yep.
Definitely. And I think it's super helpful I think it's more helpful for buyers. I can, for me, I can see less concessions and less, going to the buyers from the sellers by having pre-listing.
Well, and what we've seen on the buyer's end of it is we will come and do we've done this a handful do it a handful of times a month where we're just doing a termite inspection and radon test,
Yeah.
right? Because the home was pre-inspected and the buyer feels comfortable with what's there, right? And I've told agents that before. I was like, if it's done by certain people or certain companies, like you don't need
Yeah.
to bring us in, right? Like
No. Yeah,
you want to
definitely.
bring us in to confirm it, like we're happy to do it.
Yeah.
Or if your buyer's just really picky, like we're happy to do it.
Yeah.
But there's guys in town that I know of that like if we're going behind them, like I know there's not anything we're going to see that they didn't see,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. Definitely. I could definitely see that. Yeah. I mean, if I had a buyer with a home inspection with you, I mean, of course, I'd still suggest them to get their own home
yeah,
inspection, but I use you all the time. So for me, I trust you guys. So
yeah, and I mean, and we get asked a lot of times by buyers to do like a repair check,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
So
we do
hey,
that
they
a
got a
lot.
pre-listing inspection, they
Yeah.
did repairs on it. We just want to make sure the repairs were actually done.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that a
Um,
lot for
Yeah.
sure.
So I mean, we have done that. I don't like doing that because the liability of it
Yeah.
gets a little squirrely, because we can't fully protect the buyer in that situation.
Yeah.
Um, so like if it's a different inspection company, especially doing it, I always recommend like, hey, just get a full inspection because it's going to protect you better,
Yeah.
right?
For
But
sure.
yeah, there's been some that we've done pre-listings on where we get the call back from the buyer and they're like, hey, you guys did the pre-listing inspection. That report looks really good, but can you confirm repairs or do some extra testing for us? We want to use the same people that already know and
Yeah.
understand the house, right? Um,
Yeah.
which gets me frustrated. It's like lost an inspection, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's all
Well,
good.
but on one point though, if you think about it, this could be like really beneficial to buyers too, because they're not
Sure.
spending, I mean, which I hate it for you, but you know what I mean? Like, but on the other hand, as a selling aspect, they're not spending the $500 on
Right.
that. They're maybe getting the rate on in the past, but so it could be a savings on the buy side too, which is kind
They
of a good, it makes it more appealing.
Well, and I think like the demand for pre-listings has never been where I think it should be. And granted, I own a home inspection company, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm a little biased.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so like when you go into a listing, I mean, there's so many things that you're trying to go over with your seller, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just not an easy thing for you to be like, oh yeah, by the way, also home inspection.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we are seeing a lot more of now is that and you mentioned it, a buyer's wanting to inspect the house or have some sort of like mild guarantee that there's nothing huge here before you go under contract.
Yeah.
And the pre-listing inspection solves that
Totally.
100%,
I can
right?
see.
Where you can feel comfortable making an offer quick, putting in due diligence. I mean, there's always that, like, I don't know who this inspector is. Are they, skimming over stuff for the seller and all
Yeah.
that, which I'm sure does happen, but from what I've seen, like the professional inspectors in our area are not going to be ethically compromised in any way,
Yeah.
right?
I could
People
definitely.
say that about us, sometimes too. They're like, "Well, you work a lot with this agent, so of course you're going to do whatever it takes to close a deal." I was like, "That's not true, even a
Hmm.
little bit."
No, I don't think
We're
so.
going to work with them to make sure that
Yeah.
they have everything they need to get the deal closed, but
Yeah.
we're not like looking at something and being like, "Hey, Carrie, look over here. We're not
Yeah.
going to put that in
No,
there."
you guys have never done that. No way. Like,
And
yeah.
most
That's so
no, I
funny.
mean, 99% of people do that. So
I know. But I do have people ask me that. That's a question. They're like,
Mhm. For
well,
sure.
I'm like, no, they're gonna, I mean, legally you have to say what it is. I mean, like, what's up?
Well,
So
and I think like that's, legally we're under contract with the buyer or the seller,
yeah,
right? Like you send us referrals and we're eternally grateful. And of course we're gonna service our referral leads, right? Like just the
yeah,
same way that you do with referral agents, right? If an agent from Myrtle Beach sends you a house, like you're gonna still work with that
yeah,
agent to try to generate more referrals and
yeah,
those kind of things. But ultimately, like your responsibility is to your client.
yeah,
And I can tell you, like, there's this day and age with all the litigation and threats of lawsuits and all that stuff, like it just not worth it
nope.
for an extra 15 inspections a year to start glossing over things. Like it's not.
Yeah, it's not worth it in any respect in real estate, period, to gloss over
Right.
anything. Just saying.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the way it is. With anything, you got to be ethical and honest and truthful with everything. That's
And good agents know how to take the big issues and
yeah,
move past it, right? And
yeah,
I've always said, like, it's not our job to not see the issue. It's our job to help you guys understand how to carry through it, right? Like one of my best friends we did an inspection for, and he had $50,000 worth of structural issues
yeah,
and loved the house, right?
yeah,
It's in a great neighborhood.
yeah,
It's a big house. It fit his family well. And this is also why
yeah.
you hire an agent. Like it was a FISBO, for sale by owner,
Wow.
and a very experienced agent on the buy side. And she worked that seller over and was like, you're paying for this or else you're going back on the market. And this is in 2015. You couldn't afford to go back on the market, right?
Yeah,
Because there just weren't as many buyers.
yeah,
And they've lived in the house for 10 years and love it.
yeah. Well, that's
So,
great.
like,
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, what or if there's any advice would you give a seller who's hesitating on getting a pre-listing and inspection?
I think if you're hesitating on it, call us directly or message us on Facebook or Instagram,
Yeah,
something along those lines, and let us have a conversation to
yeah,
see, go through like again, it's go through the strategies.
mhm,
You're hesitant on it. Hey, let's talk through like what are you concerned with?
yeah,
What are the advantages? And I'm never hesitant to tell somebody like it doesn't sound like this is a good thing for you to do, right?
yeah,
If you're sitting there and you're on your last $200 in your checking account, like yeah, probably not the best thing for you to do,
yeah. I would agree.
right?
No.
Just if you're selling your house because you just need to get out from under it, like this probably isn't
Yep.
the best thing for you.
Yeah.
But typically, what we've seen in this market is, I'd say like 450 and above.
Hmm.
Um, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, for sure. It's just it's a different price point. So I can
Yep.
definitely see that for sure, definitely, for sure. So that's a great piece of advice for actually agents out there too, because they can better, help their sellers.
Mhm.
Because I mean, it makes sense for sure, price point and and what they've got saved typically. Um,
And then there's a price point like in Winston, Greensboro, High Point area when you start getting like 1.5 and up,
mhm.
it's probably not worth doing either. Honestly, at that point, it's worth just bringing in the specialist to look at the systems,
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
right? Like go get the HVAC person, go get a
Yeah.
roofer because those systems tend to be much more complicated, but they're also typically maintained really well too,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So,
definitely.
you know,
Yep. Yeah.
we typically find very few issues in houses that are 1.5 and over because there's typically no question on when stuff pops up.
Yeah.
They're calling somebody or they have somebody that's preemptively making sure that nothing pops up, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, at this price, I mean, it is what it, I mean, like you're just going to, I mean,
Yep.
it is, it's just, it's the seller, I mean, it's the homeowner, period. So
Yep.
it definitely would, for sure, for sure. So, do you have any of any success stories, that, that the pre-listing, inspection played like a pivotal role? I think we went over a few, but do you have anything else? Any other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think again it's just ease of transaction. So, like
Yeah.
I love hearing like I'm a business person. I like working with other business owners and real estate agents on helping make their business better.
Yeah.
So, we had an agent that used to get a pre-listing on every single one of her listings, and she would pay for it because she saw the value in it,
Yeah.
right? And when she could tell me that her average closing went from 40 days from contract to close to now it's at 27 days,
Oh, wow.
like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like if you're a real estate agent watching that, stuff like that is invaluable, right? If you're saving multiple weeks per transaction, like
Yeah.
how many more homes can you close without hiring people,
Yes. Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Or how much better can you serve, or like how much
Yeah.
more time do you want to spend with your family if you don't need to close any more homes, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
you know, I think most people, I'd say like success stories, you don't necessarily know because it's just happening in the moment. But there's so many people that I've talked to after a transaction that have personally told me, like, I will never sell a house again without doing this first.
Yeah.
Because that 2 week period of due diligence or 3 week period was such a nightmare
Yes.
that we like people don't know, right? Like they just think like agents go, okay, here's the checklist, we're putting it on. Next is the home inspection, next is this, next is that. And then the seller gets to the end of it and they're like, well, why didn't we do this ahead of time? I had the cash to fix it. And then we never would have been dealing, how many people have you walked away with bad taste in your mouth from a transaction?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like you hate the buyer, you hate the seller, you don't like
Yeah.
the agent because of what they did. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that just smooths things over, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And there's just a lot of, yeah, I'm thinking of a lot of situations where I'm like, yeah, that could definitely benefit that seller. If they do have the cash and they have the mindset too.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mindset, definitely. You got to have the,
Mindset, and they have to buy into the strategy of it.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. I think that's the biggest battle is the mindset. And you can see where it could be how much more money they could save in,
Yeah.
net ultimately. If they
Yeah.
do
And even if you don't net more money and you net more sanity,
sanity. Yes, that's exactly it. I mean, because
that's a
sanity,
that's a real thing.
that's way worth definitely. I
I mean,
definitely
I'd
agree
spend
with
an
that.
extra $1,000 to not have to deal with thinking that a deal was about to fall apart, if I were
Yeah.
selling my house.
Or losing
100%.
sleep over it, like I do a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah. Yeah, I
Sure.
definitely agree on that one. 100%. So any final piece of advice that you would give a homeowner considering doing a pre-listing inspection?
Considering doing a pre-listing, I think, you know, do your research, ask your agent about it.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody that's watching this video is going to use Carrie.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that's part of it too, right? Like if you understand the strategy and your agent's not on board with it,
Yeah.
then, like I think it should be part of the conversation you have with your agent before you put things on the market anyway, right? Like, what is your strategy? How do you go through this? Hey, I saw this cool video about pre-listing inspections. What do you think of them? I
Yeah.
can't stand them. I don't like them. Well, then it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah.
don't spend the money
Yeah.
or find a new agent. Um,
Yeah.
that's another that's another option if you believe in
Yeah.
what we're talking about. But
Sometimes
you know,
you might need to.
yeah, you might. I mean, it happens. Like just because you like somebody and they do high volume doesn't mean that they're a good fit for you,
Yeah,
right? Like
definitely.
I'm sure you've had clients that you're like, we're not a good fit,
Yeah.
right? Not a bad person, just not a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
We do the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Definitely. Definitely. Well, that is helpful. I love that we got to jump into the pre-listing inspection. And I love that you spent time with us today because I appreciate it. And I hope you come back and we talk about something else. And I know you're busy with the kids too today. So I really, really appreciate you taking time away from them because I
Yeah,
think
it's all
you're
it's
on
all
duty.
good. I need a little
Yeah.
sanity break.
Yeah.
Working from home is can be challenging. It's fun, but it can be challenging.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everyone thinks it's a lot more relaxing than it is. We're like, no, man, it's just work. Sometimes it can be more because
Yeah.
you're
When the kids
have to stop.
know, my wife knows that like dad's just downstairs, and it was a lot worse when our kids were infants and I'd go upstairs for some water and my wife's like, hey, watch the kids for a little bit. I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah. No, I get that completely. Yeah,
So now you have like 4 bottles of water here. It's like I'm not leaving.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, again, I appreciate it so much that you came on and chatted about pre-listing. If anyone needs Drew Branyon's information with Home Team, it'll be below. And you can also reach out to me. I've got all his info as well. I use their home inspection company all the time, and I truly trust them. So again, Drew, I completely appreciate it. And hopefully we get to chat again soon. Thank you
Sounds
so much.
good. Thanks,
Thanks.
Gary.
Okay.